we are on time, and I give it to you. Shall I close this mic, this lecture? Yes.
Yeah.
Screen is yours.
Everybody hear me?
I think.
Yeah, you can
turn on the mic for yours.
Yes, well, thank you so much to Jakob and Chiara and everyone putting together this event. And I'm speaking on behalf of my colleague Grace, who couldn't be here, but she was running a workshop a few days ago, which was amazing, hearing from all of the artists. But we certainly extend our regrets that we cannot make it in person. In some ways, this makes us parasites, right? We're sort of hovering alongside the actual event. We're only partially there, maybe even a little irritatingly so. But hopefully, nevertheless, we'll be good guests. So basically, Grace and I have had a long-standing interest in kind of the ethics and the politics of the parasite. We've been collaborating a little bit for a while, and we recently put together a special issue journal issue on the anthropology of the parasite. And so what I thought I might do is relay some of this work that we and our colleagues have been doing, some of the major themes it takes up, as a kind of commentary and context for some of the amazing work you all are doing and you all are on the brink of doing. And again, having a chance to listen to some of the artists talk about their projects was amazing. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully that will work very easily. Yes. Okay. All right. So, writing in the 1970s, Michel Serres came up with a theory of the parasite. The theory goes something like this. Whatever comes between me and you, between an origin and a destination, between an organism and its habitat, that third thing is the parasite. Quacks, addicts, multinational corporations, ticks, the human species itself. Today, the parasite has many faces, and in this brief talk, I want to sketch why I think that's a useful concept with which to understand the contemporary moment. Parasites allow us to see with special clarity the problems and possibilities of cohabitating, of living together in the broadest sense, with its strategies of hospitality and expulsion, its affects of gratitude and resentment. Life is parasitic. Trillions of organisms reside within and upon the average human being, from the mites in our eyelashes to the microbiome in our gut. Even human mitochondria started life as a parasite before becoming a tiny part of our species' cellular machinery. You yourself were a parasite, taking up residence in your mother. And if Freud is to be believed, she now lives in your head rent-free. This riot of seemingly ancient parasitisms finds both echo and amplification in contemporary planetary politics. Settler colonial governments and extractivist enterprises take up residence in indigenous lands, siphoning up wealth while threatening to make local communities superfluous. Social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok imitate our desires, feeding them back to us in the form of algorithmic recommendations, creating a virtual double that is sold to advertising companies. COVID hitches a ride on the globally networked mass of human bodies and thus comes between those bodies. Greenhouse gases that are the byproducts of human overactivity parasite the atmosphere, the highway between Earth and Sun, trapping us in a sweltering environment of our own making. In short, this world of frenzied interconnection excels at thrusting actors into what you might call the parasite position. Agents in the parasite position disrupt their hosts, but by definition only within certain limits. And of course, you all have talked very eloquently about that. What is so interesting, but also sort of icky about the parasite, is that it stops shy of outright opposition in favor of a more ambiguous dynamic of tolerance, intimacy, sidling up to you. And so to explore the parasite position is to find an ethics and a politics beyond redemption and beyond revolution. It is to stay with the trouble, as Donna Haraway puts it. Now, more specifically in our work, we came up with 3 ways to think about this parasite position across the different ethnographic scenes that our colleagues have explored. And that is the parasite as guest, as chance, and as filter. So one way to keep the parasite game going is to act like a good guest. Taking us to Kenya, our colleague Kevin Donovan shows how deeply the fintech corporation Safaricom has burrowed into the body politic. When users send money to each other over its M-Pesa network, Safaricom holds those transfers in a legal trust that sits inside the commercial banking system, where it collects interest. That interest is not redistributed to users whose money Safaricom is holding, but is rather held as capital and invested at Safaricom's discretion through its holding company. To numb anyone's objections, Safaricom plays the good guest. It garbs itself in Kenyan patriotism and offers up gifts, reinvesting in corporate philanthropy, leadership councils, and disaster relief. In this way, the corporation has become a kind of parastate, exercising a kind of parasitical sovereignty, as Kevin argues. So is Safaricom a guest or a host of Kenyan politics? It's hard to tell. Grace's own sensitive ethnography of life in contemporary Kyrgyzstan shows how, through hospitality, parasites can turn from guests to hosts and vice versa. She tells the story of Asya, a narcomanca, a drug user, who takes up the hospitality of a Russian man named Boria. Boria invites her to stay with him in his one-room apartment. As a lodger, she stays for free. All he asks for in return is a little domestic work, which turns out to be rather exploitative, shadowed as it is by the possibility of sex of unwanted coercive. Yet by playing the good guest, she slowly comes to sit on Boria's neck, as she puts it, taking control of his domestic situation and finances. In the end, their reciprocal exploitations seem to arrive at a kind of mutualism. Finally, many of you will be familiar with the high-wire work of the symposium's organizer, Jakob, who in a sense reframed Airbnb hosts as parasites. Jakob brilliantly set up quasi-legal Airbnbs in Munich, exploiting the lawful obligations of hospitality that constrained the city's ability to chase them out. By mirroring and parodying the procedures of Airbnb, turning it against itself, he underscored how the business model is parasitic on the city, exploiting and monetizing people's own relation to their homes. So, could one counter-parasite Safaricom in the same way, burrowing into its philanthropy projects? Can one's entry into the home as guest provide the means to become the host, the master? Much like Asya slowly incorporating herself into her host's home, or Jakob into the Airbnb business model, the counter-parasite is a Trojan horse on the lookout for openings that allows one to take control and reverse the protocols of corporate exploits. With the right toehold, the parasited can turn weakness into strength. It can begin to reverse its position. Here's another way to understand the parasite. A ping on your phone interrupts your train of thought. A match on Hinge brings pleasure or pain into your life. A night at the bar ends at the hospital. The parasite can stand for luck in the neutral sense of a chance turn of events, an alternate unfolding haunted by what might have been or what should have been. And so if we think of life as a journey from beginning to end, we can only marvel how that path is continuously parasited by ever-branching possibilities. And for many people around the world, precarity is the enforced condition of living on luck. A commuter hopes her tire doesn't pop, an adjunct hopes a course becomes available to teach. A migrant hopes in crossing the border he isn't detained. One is constantly exposed to chance turns, taking bets on complicated paths with bad odds. Working amidst the clamor of Delhi's informal settlements, our colleague Tanuj explores self-described small-time doctors that embody such bets. Authorities denigrate them as quacks and parasitic middlemen, diverting people away from the proper channels of healthcare. Sometimes these diversions work to interrupt the uncontrolled exploitation of the laboring classes. such as instances when doctors provide sick notes to abused domestic workers. In other cases, they may end up harming their patients and getting violently chased out of the neighborhood. In these ways, they are a kind of global south pharmacon, harboring possibilities of both healing and poisoning their patients. They are the second choice, not the ideal route, maybe even a dangerous shortcut, but worth a shot, sometimes literally. One final way to think of the parasite is as a kind of filter that connects us to other species. In the Dolomite Mountains, sheep grazing used to keep the forest and its ticks away from human villages. This human-sheep alliance was broken when people began moving away to the cities and the area depopulated. Now, as our colleague Deborah Nadal shows, the remaining humans are vulnerable to Lyme disease transmission via deer, mice, and even their own dogs. The tick's appetite for mammalian blood brings these species into new patterns of interaction, new kinds of bacterial kinship. In the Anthropocene, disrupted ecosystems spin out all manner of new multi-species alliances and antagonisms. One could think of the plantation, for instance, as a tightly coordinated protection racket with maize, chickens, and cattle. In exchange for eating them, they have exploded numerically, and we care assiduously for their propagation. But in doing so, we have made their parasites our problem, just as ours are now theirs. So, hope to have sketched the parasite as guests, chance terms, even filters. But one thing all of these ethnographic studies point to is the folly of trying to eradicate the parasite. The philosopher Martin Heidegger famously saw the tick as what he called world poor. Perched on a blade of grass, forelegs splayed and waiting for its meal to come by. The tick is blind to the surrounding countryside's beauty, interested only in the smell of butyric acid and the sensation of mammalian warmth. If successful, it feeds until it is fully bloated with blood. The disgust we have for such species stem from this sense that they might blindly devour us. They are imagined as a kind of swarm or multiplying pestilence that ravages all. It's often through such disgust that demagogues mobilize the biological parasite as a social metaphor. Genocides often begin by labeling populations as verminous rats or cockroaches. Zyklon B was originally developed as a pesticide. The irony is that these metaphors turn sovereigns and security forces into beasts, maiming and mauling. The rationalist fantasy of fully cleansing oneself is a path to madness, for it is to see parasites everywhere you look. It is to become a parasitic nightmare oneself, constantly interrupting the environment, blindly driven by the impulse to purification. Today, the arch parasite is, what else? Capitalism. As in the good old days of the enclosure movement, it still removes people from their land and livelihoods, but no longer funnels them to the school or factory, consigning them instead to a lumpen parasite-like existence. They often make ends meet through what James Ferguson calls distributive labor, begging, borrowing, and stealing. The addicts of Kyrgyzstan, the unlicensed doctors of Delhi, the rural remnants of the Dolomites. These people are consigned to the parasite position in their communities, but their history is a political critique. Rentier capitalists, platform economies, and extractivist states, they all started as parasites in these same communities, and they have had a field day ever since. What Anna Kornbluh recently described as a cultural preoccupation with immediacy could be understood as a desire to rid oneself of the parasites that proliferate symptomatically in the wake of capitalism's expansion. Right-wingers will tell you that the media are parasites and one needs to cut through the noise, even as they are busy creating their own doppelganger networks. They stage elaborate forms of hetero cosplay, selling a return to tradition through supplements or surgery. And yet, it is not just the right that desires this cleansing immediacy. One can see it in the romance of affect or entanglement theory, in flat ontologies that level the distinction between subject and object. Even the desire to decolonize, to cut through all of the tortured ambiguities of the post-colonial, has a certain immediacy to it. This is a love for the line of flight that escapes and undoes. In practice, these campaigns for immediacy show the strange way the host comes to actually need the parasite, shading into the psychoanalytic insight that we need our obstacles to keep us going. As any number of revolutions have learned, the elimination of the external enemy is often a prelude to the hysterical search for internal traitors. In short, to wholly cleanse oneself of parasites is to be like the proverbial dog who finally caught the car she was chasing and now has no idea what to do with herself. By playing with the parasite position, both conceptually and artistically, as you all are doing, we can puncture this fantasy and its mirror games. Parasites introduce the idea of boundaries, while also revealing that they are permeable. They focus our attention on the collective, often uncomfortable questions of limits and thresholds, of how we are to live together. Which species do we want as our familiars? Who do we want as our allies? And who are our enemies? What kinds of ecologies and with what kinds of principles will sort who lives and who dies, and in what proportions? These are the kinds of questions that will allow us to live with and live within our parasitic condition. Thanks very much.